A brilliant recent example that I can give to you of that is obviously there's all of this kerfuffle with the Kohinoor at the moment. So I just posted a brief history of what's happened to the Kohinoor, and because I've recently been reading Sohan Lal Suri's Chronicles of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji. Within that, he says himself numerous times that Ranjit Singh wanted to give the Kohinoor to Jagannath Puri, right? So I've shared that, and everyone, I don't know how many comments I've had, have been like, no, this is wrong. He wanted to give it to Harmandir Sahib. He was a Sikh. He wanted to do this. And I'm like, well, no, he didn't. Just because
Just
our
quote the
modern religious
sources. Just quote the
sensibilities.
sources and have a
Yeah,
debate and have a. And I think when I started Little History, you know, everyone just thought it's the throne at the V&A and the Kohinoor at the Tower of London. How many tours can you run on just those two? You know, I'm just like, mate, it's a lot more than the Kohinoor. And since 1999, it's a lot more than the Golden Throne of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, right? You know, and I've purposely avoided the Kohinoor in my tours. You know, we've never done a tour with the Kohinoor. There's no need for it because everyone thinks they know that story
yeah,
already.
yeah.
They know it all to do with the
And
Kohinoor.
everyone's convinced that they know the truth as well. And
So I don't
it's,
even entertain the Kohinoor. You
no,
know,
no.
we made a video at the Albert Memorial, and I just traced how the process of the Kohinoor being presented and cut, and all the places it's been around London, and the fact that, you know, most Indians will say they go to the Tower of London, they'll pay probably £80 for a family to get in, to be on a travelator to go across. They won't even realize which diamond is the Kohinoor. They'll think they'll know which one it is, and then they'll come to the other side to see a storyboard about it, right? That's your experience. But you can see it for free at the Natural History Museum. You can just go upstairs and they've got a stone replica of the Kohinoor sitting there in their minerals gallery. Right? The same lighting on it, the same everything. So I say to people, and you can see a dinosaur. So
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
even
why
better?
not? Yeah, I'd rather go to the Natural History Museum.
Yeah, and it's got the
That's
Kohinoor in the mineral gallery,
that's
the vault
amazing.
upstairs,
Well,
right?
well, that's a little secret you wouldn't find out from anywhere else. So I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, no,
That's
there's
quite
lots like
insightful.
that. So that's how these tours have all kind of connected
That's
together.
amazing. The second question I wanted to ask you was, consider so considering you work with all of these museums and different kind of
Now we
now,
work with.
yeah, and
Yeah,
institutions and everything else that
yeah.
goes on, you must be well aware of how many items these organizations hold, and a lot of them, from what I've gathered kind of
It's in the
along the way,
archives.
yeah, just sit in storage in the archives. Now, two questions I guess out of this. One, which is a little bit selfish, which is, if I want to dig into these archives, if I want to go see them,
Mm. Mm.
who do I get in touch with? Because I
Right. So
actually
I mean,
want to
the
get
best
involved.
thing is you have to be polite and you have to be professional. That's the two things you need to do. I'm going to give you an example of the Maidstone Museum, right? They're a small museum in Maidstone. They have a beautiful Satluj gun cannon, an amazing, exquisitely carved cannon, sitting 20 minutes away from the Gravesend Gurdwara from Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And it's much better than the cannons I can show you elsewhere in the Royal Armouries, right? This one was treated like a trophy at the end and enhanced with the battles. It's got elephants on it. It's got everything. Beautiful, right? So I went there, went to have a look at it. We're going to be making a video on it soon. But then I get to know the people and the volunteers, and they go, "Oh, Mr. Singh, maybe you want to come upstairs and I'll show you something else." Right? So Gurinder Singh Maan has been working with them to look at one of the Nishan Sahibs from the battles, and they found that. But I went on a few other trips later, and they've shown me the jacket of Lieutenant Grimes, the blood-soaked jacket of Lieutenant Grimes. Lieutenant Grimes died because he was struck here by a Sikh sword, and the blood dripped down the jacket. 170 years later, and they've still got the jacket, and they show you, oh, this is all his blood struck by a Sikh sword, and they've got a Sikh sword there, you know, that potentially could have killed him, you know. And then they show you a butler, a bowl picked up from the battlefield, you know, from a Nihang Singh probably, you know, and they show you all these things, and, you know, you can have an afternoon of learning. And what can I do with that stuff? You know, all I'm asking them to do is bring it out a bit more if people attend, you know. But if people don't attend and ask for it or request it or write to them and say, I understand you've got these in your collections, then all they can do is digitize it, put it on a digital thing. And then the problem, like you said, Amar, is they're not going to say it's a Nihang Singh Bhatta. They're going to say it's a bowl picked up on a battlefield. And if it's a bowl, you're never going to find it on your searches, right?
Durham University, a year and a half ago, I was going through their online digital archives. And they've got some images. I'm not sure when they're from. I think 19th, 18th century. Well, probably not. 19th century, most likely. And there's one of, I think it's of Jamdar Kushal Singh, but only because Amandeep Madra enlightened me as to who it was, because it's actually titled Maharaja Ranjit Singh, because the person who's been drawn has a halo, but it's not him. It's obviously this Jamdar Kushal Singh who obviously isn't as important as Maharaja Ranjit Singh, but because they have no idea who this person is, they've just mistitled it. And then there was another one of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, who they had also titled as Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And to any kind of Sikh, even like I could probably pick my 6-year-old niece up and she'd be able to tell me that that's Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. But some of these institutions just don't have, they just lack that bit of knowledge to
But then we
really.
have to just help them, don't we? We have to
Yes,
help them.
yes.
And that's, we have to be professional and we have to approach them in that way. And then I think opportunities start opening up, because I'll describe, some of the relationships I've had with these people. They come to me and I think, why are you coming to me? Why are you not going to Amandeep for this or going to someone else?
Yeah.
Because in the old days, that was the only place you could go to. You do a Google search, Peter Bounce, UKPHA. That's the only two that used to come up. But now I'm getting like the Antiques Roadshow phoning me up and saying, can you give me a review of this? And I'm like, how did you find me? And they go, oh, we just did a Google search,
Yeah. I remember a few months ago, actually, I had Antiques Roadshow message being like,
Yeah.
do you
They're
have
doing the
anything?
same thing, the church. So they're doing the same thing.
Do you have anything that you can bring to auction? And I was like, no.
We had 2 items we took down there. They did the viewings, they did the thing. But you know what? You spend first 15 minutes educating the expert, and then the expert tells you that back for 10 minutes on the thing. And then someone comes in to give you a price, and they ask you the value of it beforehand.
It's just, it's just an ornate
No, but
kind of
that's
tapestry.
Yeah, that's just one. But we've had so many different ones that are quite interesting, So people come in to make documentaries from Singapore about Maharaj Singh, and they're doing some work in London in the archives, and they just want to go around and see. We've had all these kind of different kind of requests, but we'll probably come on to some other interesting stories. But it's been varied. I think having my own website has really helped. Before, I just relied on Facebook. But in COVID, we kind of published our own website. We did a highly designed website, not a standard WordPress,
Yeah. No, I like your website. I think it's definitely useful having something that exists outside of social media.
Yeah.
And especially with things like Facebook, they're dying. Like Facebook's slowly dying.
Tell me, I mean, I can tell you now,
Yeah.
that it doesn't reach
No.
Instagram. And I think just WhatsApp groups works for me best now, just send it to.
So I find it really interesting when some of my podcasts are released, because YouTube obviously shows you analytics, and in the back of it, sometimes I see that like I'm getting all of this traffic from WhatsApp, and I'm like, oh, it's obviously reached the WhatsApp aunties, so it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Definitely.
No, and I think that one I've noticed, it's much better for recruiting.
Yes.
Numbers,
So just then, kind of rewinding a little bit, then, how was it growing up in East London?
The thing for me is like as I explained, surrounded by Gurudwaras, very comfortable in a Gurudwara environment. Your social life is whatever the Gurudwara can offer you. I used to play sports for the Gurudwara, hockey and table tennis, and that brought you competing against other Gurudwara teams, the Ramgarhia circuit on all those sports, collecting trophies that are well oversized for the effort that you put in a Punjabi tournament. So you would play in the Redbridge League for 36 games and you would get a little medal. You'd go to like beat two of your friends at a Ramgarhia trophy and you get like a massive trophy from the Gurdwara. So I remember all of that. But at university, when things changed, I think for me, it was languages, speaking languages, having that reading around wider people and getting to know people from around the world. And it's all kind of sowing the seeds. And then when I started work, you kind of assume, your offices would be mixed, right? Or reflect London. But when you start joining companies and bigger companies, and, basically it is white male, white female, Asians and Black community, a much lower number. And you kind of think, I'm still standing out, so you didn't stand out at school because they were all Asian kind of in East London. But through my working career, I worked initially in a field called regeneration. So it's kind of a hybrid of multiple government departments. They source their money together and they regenerate areas. So London was on its kind of third wave of regeneration, that kind of Canary Wharf type stuff. So we're not architects, we're not planners, we just make things happen through projects, So I learnt that, worked in Stratford, which was when the Olympics was coming in and regenerated, but we didn't get any work out of that. And then ended up working for a FTSE 25 company where it's all about sales and business process outsourcing. But during my whole career, 13 years of probably working for 23 different London boroughs, and then working for regional and national government, I don't think I've come across even a turban wearing Sikh in all 13 years, and that's amazing. But the field is regeneration. It's people, generally regeneration was a 90s idea by the Labour government. And then it was lawyers at the end of their careers would try and give back to the community by doing regen. And now it's an industry, but it doesn't have its own government department. So if you're at uni, you would say, I want to do education or medicine, and then, that's a career. Regeneration was kind of like a hybrid. So, and I did my master's in European structural funding for European programs, and government, UK government. So when I did all of that, I was just like, where are, I'm always standing out, and that was fine. But then if you're confident about your Sikh, you just use that as a platform, because I think it has given me a lot of job opportunities, because when you go in an interview, I've interviewed above my colleagues with more experience, and then I get the job as a consultant, and you feel bad because that person is your senior. We went for an interview and they're picking the consultant team and you get it. Then about 6 months later, you realize, the person, he tells you over a coffee or something that his sister-in-law is Sikh, or his
it's a positive bias, isn't it?
Yeah. So when they were hippies in the 60s, they went to Amritsar and had langar, and they never forgot. So I said, you picked me above my senior based on these things, but they won't tell you straight away. They only tell you when they trust you, that they've come across some positive experiences of a Sikh. And then when they see one with a full beard and at the start, they think, well, we'll have him on the team. Imagine that. We do battlefield tours. We get dragged to people's barns, and they say the Sikhs used to live here, and they speak Flemish. They don't even speak French. So I can get away with French and Italian, but and Amandeep's had the same. You go to these little graveyards, in France, and then the locals will pull you in, and they'll start talking to you, and they're just so happy to see you. And then you wonder why the French are struggling, Sikhs are struggling in France, with their identity politically, I've just found we do south of France and north of France. I haven't done Paris tours publicly yet, but that'll be interesting then, because we're all going to be a group of Sikhs in Paris, In France and Belgium, I have no problem in the north, because they're just such small villages. I don't think they give they don't give a crap about what Paris is telling them, as long as they're. So no, my working career always meant that I stood out, but because you build personal relationships with people. I've worked in Jersey, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man. And can you believe I've met people there that have been to Amritsar? And then you think, is that why you gave me the job? Because you've been to the Golden Temple?
Positive bias that I'll happily take. I remember when I was tutoring before COVID and everything kicked in, a lot of the Sikh parents that would get in contact with me to tutor their kid, they wouldn't be bothered about any of my credentials. They'd be like, yeah, you're a Sikh, it's fine, you can tutor him. I'm like, I could be anybody. I'm not complaining, and I took it on board and loved it. And I think the other place where I experienced this, and I recommend it to anyone, is I had the opportunity to go to Jamaica before lockdown. And I swear to God, I have never, ever been treated as well as I've been treated anywhere else in the world.
Well, I've met lawyers in England who had to study Rastas and Sikhs because of the 81 Act. It was always Rastafarian and Sikh. I was in Reykjavik in Iceland, just get stopped in the middle of the high street, Waigurujika Khalsa, Waigurujiki Fateh, from like an Icelandic person. My wife's going, I said, it happens, so what? It happens all the time, so what? I can go to any part of the world and they'll spot a Singh, and they'll spot. So that was a university years really. And then, finding that London, the other thing was we used to walk a lot around London, and you could just spot these things, like for example, where people used to come and park their car in Pall Mall for the gigs in Leicester Square, the Bhangra daytimers, where you parked your car in Pall Mall, it's called Waterloo Place car park. It's a free car park after 6 o'clock, right? So you would park your car there and they would go to the daytimers. But in the corner is standing a statue of John Lawrence, and it says Governor of the Punjab. And I've been to loads, and I said, see, look, there's your ruler after Maharaja Ranjit Singh, you know. And you just say to her a couple of things when you say he was the one who ruled afterwards, you know. And they go, what? It says Punjab there. I said, yeah, well, you just got to open your eyes and look at this stuff. There's loads of it around
That is
London.
amazing.
You know?
So before we move on, then, why is there? So besides things like the pillar in Trafalgar Square, like the statue of Lawrence and all of these other kind of random bits that are scattered around London, are they mainly there as kind of memorials that were built soon after whatever event happened, or are they things that have been memorialized a lot
No,
further
so
on?
my work on this kind of shows that in the kind of Victorian era, they've just annexed a kingdom, which is probably one of the richest kingdoms in the world at the time, GDP wise, wealth wise, arts wise, and everything. And anyone who survived in India, you know, didn't die of malaria, for example, and came back very, very wealthy, you know. And I just kind of assume it's like Google, you know. So you would say, like, I want a job at Google. And then about 10 years later, you've got so much money that you could be making stately homes and doing this, that, and the other. So when they come back, they were then benefacting loads of things in the UK. And then because of that, they were being memorialized. Now, for example, Trafalgar Square, the statues came much later. They came around 40 years after the actual square opened. But that was the time when these generals were retiring and coming back from India. And two of the statues there in the corner, one's the king, the two are generals from India, one with the Anglo-Sikh wars and the Sindh wars, and then the other one's General Havelock from 1857, right? So the two front statues next to Nelson are so closely associated with India and Punjab. I can just do a tour around there, you know? And then you've got a cherry and a mosquito in the other corner, right? So, you know, a cake on a cupcake. So that's it.
So my just a question off the back of that then is, why has that history not necessarily been retold since then? So obviously, I understand that the people at the time who are paying for this, so to speak, have their own interests at heart in terms of setting up these memorial statues, whatever you want to call them. And I also understand the culture at the time
Because they were
values,
contributing and
yeah,
they were part of
yeah.
government and etc. Yeah.
And obviously the society at the time would have almost seen them as like signs of how powerful and how great Britain was and how amazing society is and all the rest of it.